morning, or depending on when you're watching this, good afternoon, good evening, or good night. My name's Ross, and as always told, out of Voice of Radio. So today, we're looking at a Flygon. And we're not going to mention that Flygon is one more Pokemon that could be fighting, but for some reason isn't fighting. No, ladies and gentlemen, it's not a topic I want to talk about today. So we're not going to. It's a really nice new Flygon. It has been translated by the lovely Antoine Boulet, one of our very favourites here. And if we start off with the basics, it's got 150 HP, which is lower than I want for a Stage 2 nowadays. Having said that, we've never had a Flygon, at least a single prize Flygon, with 150 HP before. There were some EXs back in the day that had 150 HP. Fun fact, the first Chase EX, call it what you will, card I ever pulled from any pack, which is kind of cool. And we had a Level X card, which couldn't even match up to this. In your face, Level X Flygon. The most recent one was from Dragon Majesty, only had 140 HP. So even though it's low, I suppose it is to be expected. We got a retreat cost of 1, which means we get free retreat with U-turn board that we like very much indeed. And we got a weakness to grass, which is fine. Grass really isn't seeing much play at the moment, but welded X are, so even if grass do come around, they're really gonna be struggling against some of these welded X. So it's just one of those sit, chill out, have some fun, enjoy yourself, don't worry about it. You might as well have no weakness. But you're a fighting Pokemon, and being a fighting Pokemon is really good. We like being a fighting Pokemon. We get, very briefly before rotation, Dietzy Prism Star to an extra 20 damage. We've got Karate Belt to reduce our attack cost by 1 fighting energy if we're behind on prizes, and Martial Arts Dojo if we're using basic fighting, which we will be, to do an extra 10 damage, or if we're behind on prizes, an extra 40 damage. Plus you're hitting weakness against a cacophony of Pokemon, like Pikachu and Zekrom and Dedenne now, best attacker, best support Pokemon. And time this set actually comes out, Eternatus VMAX and Crobat, best attacker, best support Pokemon. So it's a really, really phenomenally fun time to be a fighting Pokemon. You are a Stage 2 though, so you're gonna have to be good in order to see play. Well, the ability's starting us off nicely. While this Pokemon is your active Pokemon, your opponent's active Pokemon cannot retreat. Cool. Just stop them retreating. And yes, they can still switch, but a lot of people rely on retreating. A lot of people are playing cards like U-turn board or air balloon to allow them to retreat more easily, but they're not going to be able to use either of those. So maybe they've got a switching card, otherwise you're good. We've got Boss's Orders nowadays, which can drag any Pokemon into the active, and when you combine dragging Pokemon in the active with stopping them retreating out of the active, you could really, really be hurting your opponent here using Flygon. Of course, it's the same ability that the Plasma Snorlax had, which was very cool, and that one put in a bit of work. Weirdly enough, it might have been a basic Pokemon, which helped. It also had 10 less HP as a basic, not a Stage 2, that was released years ago. Seriously, why does Flygon have such low HP? Doesn't seem fair. I'm sure there's a video game reason, but that's not my point, ladies and gentlemen. That's not my point. So we like this, and this will legitimately win you games. Not every game. I don't know if it's an ability around which you can particularly build an attack, but certainly it's going to win you games. Your opponent's got 2 cards left in their deck, none of them are switching cards, so you drag up a Pokemon that cannot attack, and you're fine. Remember, you don't have to, and we all do this, we all use cards like Boss's Orders to try and trap a high retreat Pokemon in the active. But with this ability, it's not about a high retreat Pokemon, it is just about a Pokemon that cannot attack. Because your opponent's got 2 choices when they can't retreat. They can switch, or they can attack. So if they're out of switching options and you drag up something that isn't going to be attacking, maybe it is something like a Crobat or a Dedenne, but your opponent isn't playing the requisite lightning or darkness energy, and they're done. You see, the thing is, we've got an awful lot of attacks that stop your opponent retreating. The problem is, they're attacks, they do damage, and sooner or later you're going to get a KO, and when you get a KO, your opponent is then able to play again. The genius of this, why I love this quite so much, and it's why I love the old Snorlax, you don't need to attack. So, the example I've given many, many times was Gabite, back when I played Garchomp against Hawlucha. Hawlucha couldn't attack a non-EX Pokemon and had a resistance to fighting. Gabite did 20 damage, so you could literally just lock a Hawlucha in the active for as long as you like, unless your opponent had a switch. And if they didn't have a switch, they lost. My good friend Tommy Roberts did the exact same thing against a Hawlucha using the Snorlax. So I adore this ability. I think it's a game-winning ability. And even if you're not winning games with it, drag up a Pokemon that cannot attack, and then 2 or 3 hit KO it, and unless your opponent hits a switch in the next 1 or 2 turns, you will get a cheeky KO. So I adore the ability. What about the attack? Free energy, 130 damage. Not loving it. If your opponent has a stadium in play, discard it. If you do, prevent all effective attacks, including damage, done to this Pokemon during your opponent's next turn. It makes you invincible! Now, incidentally, it is this Pokemon, not the defending Pokemon, i.e., your opponent can switch as much as they like. They've got to switch your Pokemon in order for you not to have immunity. You're going to have immunity a lot. And what this basically says to your opponent is, if you play a stadium, I get a turn of invincibility. How mean is that? Very mean is the answer. Literally, you play a stadium, I get a turn of invincibility. Now, the reality of the situation is, your opponent just isn't going to play a stadium. Simple as that. Great. Because you see, Tall Scrapper might be back, but Field Blower is gone. We don't have good ways to get rid of stadiums nowadays, other than playing your own stadium. So you put a stadium down, something like Martial Arts Dojo, you're doing the extra damage, yay! Or any number of other super annoying stadiums. And if your opponent gets rid of the stadium by playing their own, they're giving you a turn of invincibility. Unless there's no chance you can attack next turn. How wonderful is that? So now your opponent can't retreat, and they can't play any stadiums. Or they can, but if they do, you're really punishing them for it. And this becomes a super annoying Pokemon. Now, as for the damage, it's fine. Actually, while we're here, the attack cost, if you're behind on prizes, Karate Belt and Twin Energy will pay this attack by themselves. So this is actually a really payable attack. I'm far more worried about the stage 2-ness than I am about the energy cost. We also do have the option of Colossal, that accelerates 1 fighting, 1 fire energy from your discard pile to one of your Pokemon. And that's awesome. But again, it's another stage 2. And my rule generally with stage 2s is, if you're going to be playing more than one of them had better be a draw engine. Think the old Magnezone, for instance. It was a stage 2, but it let you draw until you had 6 cards in your hand every turn. So that's kind of busted, to be honest. It was a really good card. So you could play it with Emboar and it would be alright, because Magnezone was your draw engine. And you would always get Magnezone before Emboar, unless getting Emboar would win you the game right now. In terms of the damage, it's enough to get your Dedenne, it's enough to get your Crobat, it's enough to get Pikachu and Zekrom, which is pretty gosh darned relevant. It's enough to get Eternatus V. It is not enough to get Eternatus V Max. Not quite. Having said that, if you're behind on prizes and you have a Martial Arts Dojo out, then you'll be hitting 170, 340 with weakness, and you will be getting an Eternatus V Max. As a quick side note here, remember that Martial Arts Dojo works on basic fighting energy, so if you use Karate Belt and Twin Energy, Martial Arts Dojo will not actually be activated at the time. So try and build up the energy in another way. But bearing in mind, you've got an ability that stops your opponent retreating, so you may well be able to buy yourself a couple of turns to attach extra energy by just trapping a Pokemon in the active that isn't able to get out of the active. And now we've got a couple different ways to win. Either we trap our opponent in the active and they deck out, and if you want to trap them in the active, might I suggest a bit of Balabra and Bryson, man? Just start milling them while they're stuck in the active just for the fun of it, and then hopefully you mill their switching cards. Or you go for damage, bearing in mind if they play a stadium, they're granting you a turn of invincibility. I love this. Against single prize Pokemon, you'll be getting the majority of them. When you're hitting for weakness, it's going to be great. The difficulty is going to be against stuff like Dragapult V Max, where you're being resisted and you're free hit KOing, and they can just manually attach energy because they're only using 2 energy to attack, and they may well be using stuff like horror energy, so you're taking damage when you attack, and it all gets quite sad. But there are going to be plenty of games where this is absolutely awesome. I'm legitimately a big fan of this card, and maybe I'm too much of a Flygon fanboy. Maybe it's not as good as I'm hoping it is, but the ability can win games and the attack can give you invincibility, so it's got to be something that's worth having a little bit of a play around with now, hasn't it? I'm giving it 4 Wassies, and that might end up being too generous, and if it is too generous, I'm sorry. Feel free to ding it a little bit if you wish, but I just see an ability that can completely wreck your opponent's day combined with an attack that can give you invincibility, and I start looking at this and going, yeah, this looks awesome, and I'm a huge fan. But I'd like to know if you're a fan. So let me know in the comment section, would ya? Go nuts, be nice. And then make sure you like this video, subscribe to this channel, follow me on Twitter at TheWassie, and Twitch for some live action at twitch.tv/PTCGRadio. If you want to support the channel, get some bonus podcasts and all that good stuff, head on over to patreon.com/PTCGRadio, where you can do exactly that. And please do make sure you're checking out youtube.com/WassiePlays, where you can find out about a whole bunch of games that don't have Pokemon in, but are pretty gosh darned awesome nonetheless. But by far the most important thing as always, look after yourselves till next time, would ya? Thank you very much for watching. My name's Ross, and you've been watching PTCG Radio.